George shuffled the cards noisily and dealt them. Whit drew a scoring board to him and set the pegs to start. Whit said, I guess you guys really come here to work. What do you mean? Whit laughed. Well, you came on a Friday. You got 2 days to work till Sunday. I don't see how you figure, said George. Whit laughed again. You do if you've been around these big ranches much. Guy that wants to work over a ranch comes in Saturday afternoon. He gets Saturday night supper and 3 meals on Sunday. Then he can quit Monday morning after breakfast without turning his hand. But you came to work Friday noon. You gotta put in a day and a half, no matter how you figure. George looked at him levelly. We're gonna stick around a while, he said. Me and Lenny are gonna roll up a steak. The door opened quietly and the stable buck put in his head. A lean Negro man lined with pain, the eyes patient. Mr. Slim? I will state, by the way, that due to the fact this is 1930s, Steinbeck calling him a lean Negro man is quite apropos. Actually, it's arguably quite nice of him as to do so in this book, instead of calling him something else that's random. Because God knows in the 1930s and 40s, it was a lot worse off for black characters in books. Slim took his eyes from old candy, especially written by white people. Huh? Oh. Hello, Krutz. What's the matter? You told me to warm up tar for the mule's foot. I got it warm. Oh, sure, Krutz. I'll come right and put it on. Oh, I can do it if you want, Mr. Slim. No, I'll come and do it myself. He stood up. Krutz said, Mr. Slim? Yeah? That big guy's messing around with your pups out in the barn. Oh, well, he ain't doing no harm. I'm giving him one of the pups. Just thought I'd tell you. He's taking them out of the nest and handling them. They won't do them no good. Oh, you won't hurt him. I'll come along with you now. George looked up. If that crazy bastard's fooling around too much, just kick him out, Slim. Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt, and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. Seen the new kid yet? What kid? George asked. Why, Curly's new wife. Yeah, I seen her. Well, ain't she a Lulu? Well, I ain't seen that much of her, said George. Whit laid down his cards impressively. Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing. I ain't never seen nobody like her. She got the eye going around on everybody. I bet she gives the stable buck the eye. I don't know what the hell she wants. George asked casually, been any trouble since she got here? It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down and George scooped it in. George laid out his own deliberate solitaire hand, 7 cards, and sits on top, and 5 on top of those. Whit said, well, I see what you mean. No, there ain't been any nothing yet. Curly's got yellow jackets in his drawers, but that's all so far. Every time the guy's around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she left something laying around here, and she's looking for it. Seems like she can pretty much seems like she can't keep away from guys, and Curly's pants is just crawling with ants, but they ain't nothing come of it yet. George said, she's gonna make a mess. It's gonna be a bad mess about her. Jailbait all set on that trigger. That Curly's got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it ain't no place for a girl, especially like her. Whit said, if you got any ideas, you ought to come into town with the boys tomorrow night. Why, what are you doing? Just the usual thing. We go to the old Susie's place. Hell of a nice place. Old Susie's a laugh. Always cracking jokes. Like she says when we come up to the front porch last Saturday night, Susie just opens the door and then she yells out over her shoulder, get your coats on, girls, here comes the sheriff. Never talks dirty, neither. Got five girls there. Well, what does it set you back? George asked. 2.5. Get a shot for 2 bits. Susie's got nice chairs to set in, too. If a guy don't want to flop, well, he can just sit in the chairs and have a couple of 3 shots and pass the time, and Susie don't give a damn. She ain't rustling guys through and kicking them out if you don't want to flop. I might go in and look the joint over, said George. Sure, come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun. her cracking jokes all the time. Like she says one time, she says, I've known people that if they got a rad rug on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp and a phonograph, they think they're running a parlor house. That's Clara's house she's talking about. And Susie says, I know what you boys want, she says, and my girls is clean, she says, and there ain't no water in my whiskey, she says, and if any of you guys want to take a look at the Cupid doll lamp and take out your own chance getting burned, well, you know where to go. And she says, there's guys around here walking bow-legged as they looked at the Cupid doll lamp. George asked, Clara runs the other house, huh? Yeah, says Whit. We never go there. Clara's got 3 butts cracked and 50 cents a shot, and she doesn't crack no jokes, but Susie's place is clean, and she's got nice chairs, and don't let no goo-goos in there either. Me and Lenny working up a steak, said George. I might have to go in and set and have a shot, but I ain't putting no 2.5. Well, gotta have some fun sometimes, says Whit. The door opened, and Lenny and Carlson come in together. Lenny crept into his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at the old Candy, who sat faced the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them down on his bed and brought out the pistol, took out the magazine, snapped a loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with a little rod. When the injector snapped, Candy turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned it back to the wall again. Carlson said casually, Curly been in here yet? No, said Whit. What's eating on Curly? Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun. Well, he's looking for his old lady. I've seen him going round and round outside. Whit said sarcastically. He spends half his time looking for her, and the rest of the time she's looking for him. Curly burst into the room excitedly. Hey, you guys see my wife? He demanded. She ain't here, said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. Well, where the hell's Slim? Well, to the barn, said George. He was, gonna put some tar on a split hoof. Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. How long ago he'd go? 5-10 minutes. Curly jumped out the door and banged after him. Whit stood up. Well, I guess maybe I'd like to see this, he said. Curly's just spoiling her. He wouldn't start for Slim, and Curly's handy, goddamn handy. Got in the finals for the Golden Gloves. He got newspaper clippings about it. But just the same, he better leave Slim alone. Nobody'll know what Slim can do. Thinks Slim's with his wife, don't he? Said George. Looks like it. Of course Slim ain't. At least I don't think Slim is. But I like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, let's go. George says, well, I'm staying right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lenny and we gotta make up a steak. Carlson finished the cleaning of the gun and put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. Well, I guess I'll go out and look her over, he said. Old Candy lay still, and Lenny from his bunk watched George cautiously. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lenny. What you got on your mind? I ain't got nothing, George. Slim says I better not put them pups so much for a little while. Slim says it ain't no good for him, so I came right in. I've been good, George. I could have told you that, said George. Well, I wasn't hurting him none. I just had mine on my lap patting it. George asked, Did you see Slim out in the barn? Oh, sure I did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more. Did you see that girl? You mean Curly's girl? Yeah. Did she come in the barn? No. Anyways, I never seen her. Well, you never seen Slim talking to her? Slim ain't been in the barn. Okay. I guess them guys ain't gonna see no fight. If there's any fighting, Lenny, you keep out of it. Well, I don't want no fights, said Lenny. He got up from his bunk and sat down at the table across from George. Almost automatically, George shuffled the cards and laid out his solitaire hand. He used a deliberate, thoughtful slowness. Lenny reached for a face card and studied it, then turned it upside down and studied it. Both ends is the same. George, why is both ends the same? I don't know, said George. It's just the way they make 'em. What was Slim doing down the barn when you seen him? Slim? Sure. You seen him in the barn, and he told you not to pet pups so much. Oh, yeah. Well, he had a can of tar with a paintbrush, and I don't know what for. You sure that girl didn't come in like she came in here the other day? No, she never come. George sighed. You made the whorehouse every time, he said. And a guy can go and get drunk and get everything out of his system all at once, ain't no messes. And he knows how much it's gonna set him back. These here jailbaits is just set on the trigger of the hooskow. Lenny followed his words admiringly and moved his lips a little to keep up. George continued. You remember Andy Cushman, Lenny? Went to grammar school. The one where his old lady used to make hotcakes for the kids? Lenny asked. Yeah, that's the one. You can remember anything if there's anything to eat in it. George looked carefully at the solitaire hand. He put an ace up in his scoring rack and piled a 2, a 3, and a 4 with diamonds on it. And he's in San Quentin now on account of a tart, said George. Lenny drummed on the table with his fingers. George? Huh? George, how's it gonna be? Till we get that little place and live with the fat of the land and the rabbits? I don't know, said George. We gotta get up a big state together. I know a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't giving it away. Old Candy turned slowly over. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. And he said, Tell about that place, George. Well, I just told you. Just last night. Well, go on. Tell again, George. Well, it's 10 acres, said George. Got a little windmill, a little shack on it, a chicken run, got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, cots, nuts, got a few berries. There's a place for alfalfa and plenty of water to flood it. There's a pig pen. And rabbits, George. No place for rabbits now, but I could easily build a few hutches and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits. Damn right I could. You goddamn right I could. George's hands stopped working the cards. His voice grew warmer. And we could have a few pigs, and I could build up a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had, and we can kill a pig, and we can smoke the bacon and the hams, and make sausages and all that. When the salmon run up the river, we could catch 100 of them and salt them down or smoke them. We'd have them for breakfast. They ain't nothing so nice as smoked salmon. When the fruit come in, we can go over and the tomatoes, and they're easy can. And every Sunday, we'd kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we'd have a cow or a goat, and the cream is so goddamn thick you could get a knife and cut it and take it out with a spoon. Then he watched him with wide eyes, and old Candy watched him too. Then he said softly, We could live off the fat of the land. Sure, said George. All tins of vegetable in the garden. And if we want a little whiskey, we could sell a few eggs or something, or some milk. We just live there. We'll belong there. Around the country and getting fed by a Japanese cook. No, sir. We'd have our own place, and where we belonged and not sleep in no bunkhouse. Tell about the house, George, Lenny begged. Sure, we'd have a little house and a room to ourselves. A little fat iron stove. In the winter, we'd keep a fire going in it. And ain't enough land, so we'd have to work hard, too. Maybe 6-7 hours a day. We wouldn't have to buck no barley 11 hours a day. And when we put in a crop, why, we'd be there to take the crop up. We'd know what come of our planting. And rabbits, Lane said eagerly, and I'd take care of them. Tell how I'd do that, George. Sure, you'd go out to the alfalfa patch, and you'd pick up a sack, and you'd fill up the sack and bring it in and put it in the rabbit cages. And they'd nibble, said Lenny. The way they do. I've seen them. Every 6 weeks or so, George continued. Them does would throw a litter, so we'd have plenty of rabbits to eat and sell, and we'd keep a few pigeons to go flying around the windmill like they'd done when I was a kid. He looked raptly over at the wall over Lenny's head. And it'd be our own, and nobody'd can us. And if we didn't like the guy, we could just say, get the hell out. And by God, he'd have to do it. And if a friend come along and we'd have an extra bunk, and we'd say, why don't you spend the night? And by God, he would. We'd have a setter dog and a couple of striped cats, and you gotta watch out with them cats don't get with those little rabbits. Lenny breathed hard. You just let them try to get to the rabbits. I'll break their goddamn necks. I'll smash them with a stick. Those cats. No. Threatened the future cats, which might disturb the future rabbits. George sat entranced with his own picture. Then when Candy spoke, they both jumped as though they'd been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, "You actually know where there's a place like that?" George was on guard immediately. "Suppose I do. What's it to you?" "You don't need to tell me where it's at. It might be any place." "Sure, that's right. Couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. "How much do they want for a place like that?" George watched him suspiciously. "Well, I get it for about $600. The old people that owns it is flat bust, and the old lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us?" Tandy said, "I ain't much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right here in this ranch. That's why they give me a job swamping. And they give me $250 because I lost my hand, and I got 50 more saved up right in the bank right now. That's 300, and I got 50 more coming at the end of the month, and I'll tell you what, suppose I went in with you guys." "That's $350 I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I can cook, and I can tend chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be?" George half closed his eyes. "I gotta think about that. We was always gonna do it by ourselves." Candy interrupted him. "I'd make a will and leave you my share in case I kick off, because I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? We could do it right now." George spat on the floor disgustedly. "We got $10 between us," he said thoughtfully. "Look, if me and Lenny work a month and don't spend nothing, we'll have $100. That'd be $450. I bet we could swing it for that. Then you and Lenny could go in there started, and I get a job to make up the rest, and you just sell them eggs and stuff like that." They fell into a silence. They looked at one another, amazed. The thing they never really believed was coming true. George said reverently, "Jesus Christ, I bet we could swing her. I bet we could swing her." Candy sat on the edge of his bunk, and he scratched the stump of his wrist nervously. "I got hurt 4 years ago. They'll can me pretty soon, just as soon as I can't swamp out no more bunkhouses. They'll put me out in the country. Maybe if I give you guys my money, you'll let me hoe in the garden even after I'm no good at it. And I'll wash dishes and little chicken stuff like that, but I'll be on our place. And I'll be let to work on my own place. You seen what they did to my dog tonight. They says he wasn't no good to himself and nobody else. Well, they can me here and wish somebody'd shoot me. But they won't do nothing like that. I won't have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs. I'll have $30 more coming. Time you guys is ready to quit." George stood up. "We'll do her," he said. "We'll fix up that old little place and we'll live there." He sat down again. They all sat still, bemused by the beauty of the thing. Each mind was popping into the future where his own lovely thing should come about. George said wonderingly, "Suppose there was a carnival or a circus come to town, or a ball game, or any damn thing." Old Candy nodded in appreciation of the idea. "We'll just go to her. We wouldn't have to ask nobody. If we could, we'll go. And we would. Just milk the cow and send some grain to the chickens and just go. And put some grass in the rabbits. I would never forget to feed them. When we gonna do it, George?" 1 month. Right smack in 1 month. Know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna write to them old people that always had the place, and we'll take it. And Candy says $100 to bind her." "Sure will. Yeah, a good stove there?" "Sure, got a nice stove. Burns coals or wood." "Well, I'm gonna take my pup. I bet by Christ he likes it there, by Jesus." Voices were approaching from outside. George said quickly, "Don't tell nobody about it. Just us three and nobody else. They're liable to can us so that we can't make no stake. Just go on like we gonna buck barley the rest of our lives. Then, all of a sudden, someday, we'll just go to our pay and scram out of here." Lenny and Candy nodded, and they were grinning with delight. "Don't tell nobody," Lenny said to himself. Candy said, "George." "Huh?" I ought to have shot that dog myself, George. I shouldn't have ought to let no stranger shoot my dog. Door opened. Slim came in, followed by Curly and Carlson and Whit. Slim's hands were black with tar, and he was scowling. Curly hung close to his elbow. Curly said, "Why, I didn't mean nothing, Slim. I just asked you." Slim said, "Well, you've been asking me too often. I'm getting goddamn sick of it. If you can't look after your own goddamn wife, what do you expect me to do about it? You lay off of me." "I'm just trying to tell you I don't mean nothing," said Curly. I just thought you might have saw her." "Well, why didn't you tell her to stay the hell home where she belongs?" "Oh, I'm sorry, that's Carlson. You let her hang around bunkhouses, and pretty soon you're going to have something on your hands that you won't be able to do nothing about." Curly whipped at Carlson. "You keep out of this unless you want to step outside." Carlson laughed. "You goddamn punk. You tried to throw a stare into Slim and you couldn't make it stick, so Slim threw a stare into you, and then you're yellow as a fraud belly, and I don't care if you're the best welter in the country. You come for me and I'll kick your goddamn head off." Candy joined the attack with joy. "Glove full of Vaseline," he said, disgusted. Curly glared at him. His eyes slipped on past the lighting on Lenny, and Lenny was still smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. Curly stepped over to Lenny with a terrier. "What the hell are you laughing at?" Lenny looked blankly at him. "Huh?" Then Curly's rage exploded. "Come on, you big bastard, get up to your feet. No big son of a bitch is gonna laugh at me. I'll show you who's yellow." Lenny looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat. Curly was balanced and poised. He slashed at Lenny with his left and then smashed down his nose with a right. Lenny gave a cry of terror. Blood welled from his nose. "George!" he cried. "Make him leave me alone, George!" He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slugging him in the face. Lenny's hands remained at his sides. He was too frightened to defend himself. George was on his feet, yelling, "Get him, Lenny! Don't let him do it!" Lenny covered his face with his huge paws and bleated out with terror. He tried, "Make him stop, George!" Then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. "That dirty little rat, I'll get him myself." George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. "Wait a minute," he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Get him, Lenny!" Lenny took his hands away from his face and looked about for George, and Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled out again, "I said get him!" Curly's fist was swinging when Lenny reached for it. The next moment, Curly was flopping like a fish on a line. His closed fist was lost in Lenny's big hand. George ran down the room. "Let go of him, Lenny, let go." But Lenny watched in terror the flopping little man whom he held. Blood ran down Lenny's face. One of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again and again, and still Lenny held on to the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken by now, and his struggle had become weak. He stood crying, his fist lost in Lenny's paw. George shouted over and over again, "Let go of the hand, Lenny, let go! Slim! Come help me while the guy got any hand left." Suddenly, Lenny let go on his hold. He crouched, cowering against the wall. You told me to, George," he said miserably. Curly sat down on the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carlson bent over him. Then Slim straightened up and regarded Lenny with horror. "Oh, we gotta get him to a doctor. Looks to me like every bone in his hand is bust." "I didn't wanna," Lenny cried. "I didn't wanna hurt him." Slim said, "Carlson, you get the candy wagon hitched up. We'll take him in the Soledad and get him fixed up." Carlson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpery Lenny. "It ain't your fault," he said. "This punch sure had it coming to him. But Jesus, he ain't hardly got no hand left." Slim hurried out, and in a moment returned with a tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, "Slim, will we get canned now? We need the steak. Will Curly's man can us now?" Slim smiled wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. "You got your sense in hand enough to listen?" He asked, and Curly nodded. "Well, then listen. I think you got your hand caught in the machine. If you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But you just tell and try to get this guy canned, and we'll tell everybody. And then, will you get the laugh? I won't tell, said Curly. He avoided looking at Lenny. Buddy wheels sounded out outside. Slim helped Curly up. Come on now. Carlson's gonna take you to a doctor. He helped Curly out the door. The sound of wheels drew away. In a moment, Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lenny, still crouched fearfully against the wall. Let's see your hands, he asked. Lenny stuck out his hands. Christ almighty, I hate to have you mad at me, Slim said. George broke in. Lenny was just scared, he explained. He didn't know what to do. I told him nobody ought to never fight him. No, I guess it was Candy, I told. Candy nodded solemnly. That's just what you done, he said. Right this morning when Curly first lit into your friend. Right this morning when Curly just lit into your friend. You says he better not fool with Lenny if he knows what's good for him. That's just what you says to me. George turned to Lenny. It ain't your fault, he said. You don't need to be scared no more. You done just what I told you to. Maybe you better go in the washroom and clean up your face. You look like hell. Lenny smiled with his bruised mouth. I don't want no trouble, he said. He walked toward the door, but just before he came to it, he turned back. George? What do you want? I can still tend the rabbits, George? Sure, you ain't done nothing wrong. I didn't mean no harm, George. Well, get the hell out and wash your face. And that is the end of chapter 3. It is the longest chapter in this book. So I'll probably end up, I definitely need to break this up into 2 parts. This is probably you hearing me say, this is probably the moment that you're now hearing me say the end of chapter 3.